Warning, the following program contains extreme coarse language and mature subject matter. Viewer discretion is extremely advised. And viewer discretion is always advised. Welcome to Talking Truth Thursday. I'm ADC. This is the most censored and, basically blocked by everyone, independent media outlet in let's say in Alberta and in Canada right now, probably North America. But unlike the capitalists that claim that they're censored and let them talk, yeah, we're not that. We got the limited subscribers, and we've had YouTube shut us down for our content multiple times. So anyway, that is our side. And our guest this week is Jonathan Parks from the Alberta Green Party, and very excited to have Jonathan on Talking Truth Thursday. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me to be here. It's a pleasure.
It's our pleasure. So do you go by Jonathan, John?
You know what? Jonathan's great. John works as well.
Okay.
Friends call me Johnny, so whatever works is.
There you go. I noticed one of the social media handles was Johnny, so I just wanted to clarify that aspect. So we were talking before the show a little bit about background. So I guess the first thing is for anyone who doesn't know who you are. A little bit about who Jonathan Parks is.
Absolutely. So yeah, my name is Jonathan Parks. My pronouns are he and him. Right now I'm in Calgary Treaty 7 territory, and I've been living in Calgary since mid-2019. Previously was living in Saskatchewan, but I'm actually from Ontario, and I've also lived in New Brunswick for a short time. Grew up in a really small rural community in Northern Ontario, which is Treaty 27 territory, and kind of moved around all around Ontario for quite a while. Got involved in church ministry, ended up going to Bible college, as you'll notice on my my profile on the website. So I was one of the reasons for moving to New Brunswick, was there for just over a year, then decided to return to Ontario and went to another Bible college there, got involved and became a church pastor in Richmond Hill, Ontario, and was there for a few years, and then transferred over to another church in Downsview, Ontario, just as well, and just in the GTA in Toronto. Was there as well for a number of years until I resigned in December of 2011, and then just kind of took my own little journey of where I wanted to go. And the glorious thing about Toronto, it's kind of the hub of Canada. So I got to meet some extraordinary people, across the country, and connected with some amazing people in Saskatchewan. So I'm like, you know what, I'll just go for a short visit and connect with some friends that were in Regina. So I went there only expecting to be in Regina for a couple of weeks. That was in late 2015, and ended up being there until from 2015 to 2019, and decided that, you know what, I'm ready for another big city experience. And I had my eyes originally set on going to Calgary, but as you know, I stayed in Regina for a few years, and then eventually, in about the summer of 2019, moved to Calgary. And I actually was involved in some nonprofit while I was here, launched the Alberta Humanist Association, and connecting with nonprofits and home reaches, specifically Be the Change YYC. They're That organization is a great friend of mine. So I got really busy as I got to Calgary with the non-religious, primarily nonprofit sector, reaching out to people who are experiencing discrimination, both within the 2S LGBTQ AI issues and, as I was saying, homeless. So they were near and dear to my heart. And so that's kind of my journey, I guess you could say, in a nutshell. My family are come from kind of like a farming family. As I was saying, I grew up in rural Ontario, and so we raised cows and chickens and pigs. And I have a twin brother who just lives outside of Ottawa, so he's an umpire, and we're fraternal. We're not identical. And my sister, she's just a couple years older. She lives with my close to my parents in Trenton. They kind of moved out of the area a few years ago to the Trenton area, and have been living there. I get a chance to go to Ontario every couple of years. So I was just there last May. I'll probably be there next year, since this year is really busy with the upcoming provincial election. So there won't be a lot of time for family visits. But yeah, that's kind of my journey all over the place. I've been to both sides of Canada, and we have a beautiful country. I've done a lot of exploring. I love hiking and camping and just connecting with people. I've always had that passion to engage and get to know and find out some of the serious stuff happening in our country and what we can do to raise each other up.
That's fantastic. So yeah, you've I mean, very similar to my own. I actually was born in Regina, Saskatchewan.
Oh wow!
Grew up in Saskatchewan. Moved to BC originally in the 90s. Then ended up back in Saskatchewan. I was in radio broadcast. So I went from the West Kootenays to the East Kootenays of BC to the Rosetown, Kindersley area of Saskatchewan, then up to Peace River in Alberta, then High Level in Alberta, then over to Vancouver Island, and was in Ladysmith, Nanaimo area for a number of years before moving back to Alberta to take a non-profit, well, not-for-profit position with Canadian Blood Services, and have been here since 2014. Nice. But I've been told I'm not allowed to get into politics from my wife, so I have to connect with people like yourselves to show I guess the passion for politics, or I don't even know if it's politics anymore. Like you were saying, connecting with Chaz and the Be the Change. That's correct.
That's right.
YYC. That stuff, and being like on the ground in like their direct connection with the houseless community and the people in poverty in Calgary. Those sort of things, for me, I believe that makes a really good political candidate, or someone who's joining a political party for the good. I don't know about others, but I think, like I said, we connected on social media. We wanted to have this conversation. I believe we have the same feelings in regards to the third party, independent aspect of our political system, but I'm also, because of my time in BC and because of seeing what's going on a federal side, that's where the concern comes in. I see as much as Better Off with Rachel, I don't know what's better off then. There's no way we can continue with not my premier, Danielle Smith. Whatever's coming further right than Smith scares the living hell out of me. Alberta Party has great ideas. We've had them on. We had good conversations, but I don't think they're progressive enough to actually bring the change in. I think Jordan and yourself and the rest of the Green Party has that progression piece. But then, like I said, we go back to that connection federally and Elizabeth May. And being in BC, Elizabeth May was not a very wasn't very well liked in the progressive in certain progressive sectors. I know if it was something that got a lot of PR or she got a lot of publicity, she was there like Flynn. But without that, any of the grassroots stuff, like I could not, unless there was going to be a lot of media there. Like on a personal level, I wouldn't see Elizabeth May being with you and Chaz in downtown Calgary with the houseless population. That's just me. But I guess my concern is how connected are you to the federal Green Party? Is there a separation, and how can you show that you're not being driven by the federal side?
Right. Yeah. Great questions. I guess I can kind of kind of give an example of like how it is within the NDP, as it is different within the Greens. So when you get membership within the provincial NDP, you actually become a member of the federal NDP, which is very different with the Greens. So there is a separation between provincial Greens and federal Greens. When you're a member of the provincial Greens, you're a member of provincial Greens. So there's no actual tie like that at all. I've actually haven't met Elizabeth May yet. She's been in the province a few times. I work full time outside of running this campaign, so it doesn't give me the ability to travel as much as I'd love to. I actually just came back from Edmonton this weekend. We had an event that the provincial party hosted Saturday night, which was fantastic, but I don't get a chance to go as often as I'd like. And when she's been in the province, her connection is going to be primarily with Jordan. She has been here a few times, and a lot of it is because, interestingly enough, we have quite a few federal Greens in Alberta that aren't connected with the provincial Greens. So it's kind of funny. I always scratch my head at it, actually, why they are not, both, meaning like not why there's no actual connection between the provincial and the federal. But if you're a federal Green, why wouldn't you want to be a provincial Green, in my mind? So I always found that kind of interesting. So a lot of the connections with Elizabeth May and Jordan Wilkie have been to really reach out to, the federal Greens to say, and a lot of the federal Greens in Alberta have a relationship with Elizabeth May. So her coming here has been really trying to say, like, I'm supporting Jordan and the hard work that him and the executive council have done to really rebuild the provincial party, and, standing behind in solidarity towards what we'd like to see happen in the province. So that's where a lot of the connections, as of late, you've probably seen her joining certain ridings, door knocking and stuff like that, and coming together. And, there's been a few hosted events. But for myself, I'm really not connected to the federals at all. And I right now, I've just been so busy getting myself immersed provincially and really understanding and connecting. There is so much, there's a lot of people very unhappy with the two-party system in Alberta, and there's a giant passion for change. And because there's just so many issues, we're not a big party. We don't have a party whip. So that makes us very different from the big tents that we have here. So in doing that, running here as a candidate for Calgary Buffalo, there are so many things that, you need to understand about how the downtown works, the issues that both parties have neglected. So it's not given me a lot of opportunity to focus on the federals, really, and even getting to know Elizabeth May. I've actually heard a lot of positive things from most of the Greens. I understand there's been definitely, and you get that pretty well everywhere, that, you get an elected leader, but there's two sides. People love them, people hate them. And that's just part of politics, but I haven't really been able to, sift through and see what's really going on. Meet the leader myself. I've met Jonathan Bedno, and I think, just from the brief conversations I've had, I think he's fantastic. I know as well, he's new to the political side himself, as being a human rights advocate, which I think is so important as well, to have that in the party, and being an empathetical, leader that is more human and in touch with some of the needs that are experienced, not just here in Canada, but across the world. So I have been impressed just listening to him. And so I know this is, a new folder for him as well to really get to run in and and do politics in. But yeah, I'm anticipating myself getting a little bit more familiar with what's going on federally. I know what's going on with the Liberals and the NDP and of course Paliev and all that fun stuff. But my mind right now and heart has been just looking at the political side. So yeah, that's kind of, maybe, I know that doesn't quite answer your question, but that's kind of where I'm at, and getting to know the people. We've got around 48 to 49,000, I think, constituents here in Calgary, Buffalo, and it's a lot of people. So I'm trying to get to know them as much as I can and impact, because I'm the 2S LGBT issues critic for the party. So I had some amazing time over the weekend to stop by, Pride Corner, and I went to a beautiful brunch yesterday for at the Campio Brewing drag queen. It was amazing. So there's so many things that I'm involved with. So federally, it's like I just had to kind of set that aside for a moment until after May elections.
Well, you answered the question, which is great, and whatever answer that you gave was perfect. I mean, I'm not looking for a specific answer. I'm not trying to vilify people.
No, for sure.
It's one of those things that I believe that people will show their true stripes. Like, just give them enough time that you can only hide under a guise of doing this for so long. And that's that thing where yourself and Jordan and other members of your organization of the Green Party in Alberta, it's a breath of fresh air. You can see that you're not driven by that old school duopoly two-party system. And this is where, for me, the frustration comes in. For me, frustration comes in the fact that we keep getting censored and we're not growing our audience as much as we can, because we want to our goal is to amplify voices that don't necessarily get the platform. But in saying that, there's a lot of people that will jump on what they call independent media here in Alberta, but it's an independent conservative media. I don't understand how you can be an independent but still spew the conservative, oh, well, we either have to have the NDP or the UC. You don't have to have either one. You can have a different choice. And it's that fear, the scare tactics and the fear there, that we get it enough from mainstream media. We know mainstream media is bought and paid for by either the conservative government or the liberal government, depending on which station you have or that. And it's bought by capitalism. And even on your mainstream media here in Alberta, yes, we've got a person like Ryan Jesperson who is independent, who has moved away from the Chorus banner, but he's still friends with Danielle Smith because they were both media personalities on Chorus. So I don't know how you can consider yourself an independent and not be conservative. Like how you can say, well, I'm not conservative. Well, you clearly are in regards to what you're doing in regards to that promoting of capitalism. And when your sponsors are major stockholders or major influencers or financial benefactors to the UCP, who's the current government of Alberta, I kind of look at, there's a conflict of interest there. And so that's where I get concerned. And then where we have individuals like the Breakdown and others, like I'm listening to West, the CBC political podcast, and they mentioned the Greens. They said, oh, you guys are surprising that you have X amount of candidates compared to the Alberta Party that at the time only had 6. But then they went into this whole thing of, well, if there's going to be an independent, it's going to be Drew Barnes. I'm going, well, Drew Barnes isn't an independent. He's a conservative, the former UCP member that's running away from the UCP. That's not a true independent. Now, when we have people like yourself or a couple of indigenous members of our province that are running independently. Those are your independent candidates.
Mm.
So when you're saying a former UCP member who has a platform, who has a bunch of funds coming from, like, basically he's going to take UCP money with him to be an independent, but are you really getting that independent side? Like, is Drew Barnes really going to vote against whatever the majority is voting if it's a UCP majority government? I don't
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
Or if he is, it's going to be like a mansion or a cinema sort of situation in the United States where I'm a UCP member, but I'm not. I'm really an independent, but I'm actually a conservative to get the money. And then, I mean, I think that's my struggle here with the third party and the independent candidates, is that fear factor. And like looking at it going, why do we have to vote for a party when we can
Mm.
just vote for the best candidate
Yes.
in your riding? And where I'm looking at you and Jordan and some of the other candidates that the Green Party have, you're looking at a proportional representation side of it, not a first past the post sort of. Yes, you're in the first past the post platform, and you have to, because our political sector is so broken because it's been driven by colonialism, built
Mm.
by colonialism and capitalism.
Yeah.
um, you have to work within that system.
Yeah.
But when we're looking at the third party, why can't people vote for the best person who's going to represent them in the legislature, not just who is going to follow the leader into the legislature?
Yeah, it's trying to get voters to break away from this, faithfulness to brands, and that's basically, what my granddaddy or, my family has. And we're seeing more of that starting to break away, like an iceberg. And that's what we want to see, and that's what we're excited to see. Jordan talks a lot a bit about this, and he's much more, educated on the previous proportional representation Alberta used to have around the mid 1900s, and how much better that was as an electoral system. And the media is very frustrating. We will get the odd mention, and it's more of a blimp on the radar for them, but they also reinforce this branding. And it all just stems back down to how poor our education system really is on educating people on politics, which is so important. We've trained our families to not talk about politics around the table, but politics impacts your life on a day-to-day basis. And it's not just how silly or dumb or stupid they make us look on a national landscape, but it's just how it impacts people's lives on a day-to-day basis, whether it's affordability, or whether it's healthcare, or it's education, or it's being able to find a job that pays better than minimum wage, or all of those things impact everybody. And that's what we need to return to, is looking at the candidate, and what are they fighting for. And you can't fight for something if you're not listening. And as I was door knocking around Calgary, Buffalo, and it's consistent with the other candidates across the province, that they haven't even seen their MLA in a long time, because they know, well, you've got apples or oranges. Who you gonna vote for? And if you don't like, you don't have to work hard to get the other party to look silly. They do it for themselves. So regardless if I show up at your door, you're just gonna vote for me anyway. So they get comfortable. We talk about this at times about career politicians. They're comfortable, and we need to make them uncomfortable. We've been talking a lot over the last number of weeks about demanding better. Demand better. Don't settle for, oh, I just need somebody better than Danielle Smith or the UCP. There's more to life than just that.
Yeah.
It's the disability sector. It's it's our education sector. It's our, healthcare. Like, the list is long. There's issues on, 2 miles long of so many problems that, I'll tell you this, if I was an elected, opposition, I would be pounding every single day. They would have to mute my mic. That's one of the things I keep telling people when I go to the doors. Oh, I've always voted for Joe, or Joe ran one election. He's just going to run a second one in this riding. or I've always voted NDP. And I'm like, well, do you realize they're not, campaigning on X, Y, and Z? There's been nothing about this. Or I've always voted, UCP. Well, they're not going to get elected because, this has been, an NDP riding. So, why don't you vote for someone who's going to start listening to you? We're here at the door. These candidates don't have to show up. They already know they've got your vote. So I'm here, I'm listening, and I'm ready to fight. And, if I was, like I said, if I was the official opposition, they would have to mute my mic at the legislature, because there are so many issues that have been mute the last 4 years that now they're coming back as it's getting closer to election. Like, we have to learn from the repeated mistakes or the repeated tactics that these parties continuously do time and time again. What are they doing between now and then? It's just like feet up on the desk. Yeah, but, some of the parties have done, some great things, but they're silent on too many of the most important day-to-day things. We have a province that has a lot of royalties that are being misused, and Albertans are suffering every single day, and no one is demanding better from them. We are, there are some. I can't say no one. There are definitely some, and I'm trying to amplify those voices. And that's why, if we look at what's going on in Ontario last election, 10 million eligible voters and less than 4 million showed up at the polls, because people aren't getting represented. There's a lot of, there's a lot of people that says, I wanted to vote this way, or I wanted to vote that way. But because we have this two-party system, we have this first past the post, what's the point of showing up? 6 million people could have made a big difference at the polls. 6 million people, like in Ontario. And we're going to start seeing this more and more and more. So we got to change something. Media is not going to help us, at the big media. So we just, what I mean? It's all about getting out there, listening, and making it possible for people to be represented. There's no true representation. So that's what our party is doing. We're meeting, we're listening. You can't form policy if you're not listening. These are window dressings if you look at the platforms right now. Of course, every party is going to have something on more funding for education and healthcare. Yes, we need that. It's desperately important. But what are you doing for the other serious issues? Over 60% of Albertans are paycheck to paycheck. And we're just capping energy, We're just putting a Band-Aid on to students' tuition, which has been ripped off, and now tuition skyrocketing. Look at, we've got 30% in rent increases. We're moving the ability for people to have secure shelter. There's food insecurity in Alberta. In Alberta, we have food insecurity. Our homeless population is continuing to increase. We've got over 2,000 people, close, or actually around 3,000 people really sleeping on the streets of Calgary.
Yeah. And
4 years, opposition didn't say anything. They're not out there, highlighting this injustice. Like, come on, So I'm asking Albertans, continue to demand better. We can, what I mean? That there's a large population that's disconnected from politics because of these very, very, very real things that are being ignored. And then, I do challenge anyone that comes online and starts saying, you're going to split the vote. I'm like, well, you know what? There's a lot that, you've missed during your time, in school that weren't taught to you about how our electoral system is significantly flawed. Rachel Notley, previous election, had that part of her campaign, returning, proportional representation. But power is hard to lose. And she lost the election, but she could have prevented the UCP from getting into power like they did, and there would have been true representation. So when I tell people, like, people come to us all the time and saying, it's not your time, Greens, it's not your time, because they see that we're doing really well. And I'm saying, if you're scared, go back and demand better from your party leader, from your favorite brand. Go back and talk to them and say, do better, because people are joining other parties because they're fed up, they want more. And, we're scared that we could legitimately, like the Greens, they weren't, ready in the previous election to be where we're at today. And without, doing so well, look what happened to the NDP. Strategic voting didn't help them. And that's what I remind them all the time. Strategic vote only reinforce this undemocratic electoral system. You can't tell me you love democracy and support first past the post, because it's not democratic. And issues are not being taken care of after these elections. We just see promise after promise after promise fail. So let's do better. Let's demand better, and we can. And if people continue to join us as they are, we will.
Absolutely. And that, I think when people are saying that strategic voting, there is a way to strategic vote. You strategically vote for the best person that's going to represent you
Yeah.
in the ledge. I think that's like, if people want to say, oh, well, I want to vote strategically. Well, yes, you want to do that. Like, I've come out multiple times and said, hey, I have no problem if Rachel Notley wins this next election. I just don't want her to have a majority.
Mm-hmm.
I want people like yourself and Jordan and other candidates to be represented in the ledge so you can keep them accountable, because accountability is missing once you have a majority government. I mean, as much as I don't agree with a lot of things, actually about 99% of what the Prime Minister and Jagmeet Singh and that coalition are doing in regards, because it's a lot, like you said, it's a lot of window dressing. It's a lot of, oh, we're going to do this for people, but it's all tied to tax breaks and refunds, and it's not getting money in the hands of Canadians or money in the hands of citizens. So when people are looking at that and looking at the Greens, one of the things that Jordan has mentioned a lot, you've mentioned a lot, other members have mentioned a lot, is universal basic income. And I'm a huge proponent of that, because of the fact that I am such a volatile individual, speaking the truth that people don't want to hear. I am not, I was very well connected when I first moved to the province. Like, people wanted me to come and work for their company or whatever, until I started to call out their company for exploitation, or because your company is abusive, or that sort of thing. Like, the last position I held after leaving the Canadian Blood Services, I was actually a independent contracted marketing director for a local not-for-profit. And at the major annual fundraising event, it was brought up that a major donor assaulted one of our female volunteers. So I went and approached the female volunteer to get her side of the story, find out what happened, if they were comfortable pointing out who did it, and that sort of thing. And they were very hesitant because of the fact that money is power. And even in smaller communities, money will block a lot, like will basically protect the abusers. So when I'm sitting here, I'm going through this event, I brought it up to our board chair and the vice chair and said, look, this is what's happened. What are we going to do about it? Oh, well, we'll take care of it. Okay, so the guy was continued to become drunk, and because the more you drink, the more money you spend in the auctions. That is what it's all about. How much money can we get from this person? And because the amount of money they donate to the organization is worth more than the young lady who was abused, they took that side. And then we got to the wrap-up meeting afterwards, and I said, okay, so what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to prevent this from happening? How are we going to protect our volunteers? And they're like, well, they're already protected. I'm like, no, how are we going to protect our volunteers? Like, are we going to ban this individual for at least, like, suspend them for a year and send a letter saying, we appreciate your support, but we cannot have this sort of behavior. We cannot tolerate abuse of our organization, just because of the financial situation you hold. And no one wanted to go to that. And I said, so I'm sitting there, and by the end of the meeting, I said, you know what? I'm not renewing my contract. So you guys can find a replacement person. You don't want to listen to my ideas, but you
Wow.
sure as hell don't want to protect our vulnerable volunteers.
No.
And so I walked away from that, but there's a whole story that was of why I walked away, because the event didn't bring in as much money as it had previously. But that was based on economic state. That was based on the fact that you've done the same bullshit promotion for 10 years, like 10 years of calling something that it isn't, and just doing the same thing and bringing the same entertainment. You're going to the well, it's going to dry up, and people you're not going to have that. And then that whole thing of, well, I was known as not I've always been known as not a team player, that based on having ADHD and ODD. So that's a struggle, but it's all based on, I'm walking out. I didn't sign an NDA. I'm not mentioning the organization. I'm because there are members of the organization, and because it is a very valuable organization for the community, I don't want to totally bury it, but I also can't sit here and say nothing. So when we're looking at that on a political side, there is abuse, 100% abuse happening in the UCP to their volunteers, to their staff. Like we've had it come out in the media. There was abuse allegations to the NDP that they were very verbally, emotionally, not physically abusive, thankfully, not like the UCP, but that emotional abuse and abuse of power, and they've been called to the carpet by a number of former long-term members of the constituency offices or ridings, and we're going to investigate that. I'm still waiting for the investigation. We're still waiting for the RCMP's investigation of Jason Kenney stealing the original election. So I don't have faith in independent third party that is decided by the party investigating themselves.
Oh, for sure.
Going back to the because I know, number one, she said it many times, Rachel Notley does not believe in UBI. She's not a supporter of universal basic income. The UCP, I don't even want to listen to. Sure as shit, if they were going to be UBI, it would be to gain seats. It would be nothing to do with actually supporting your constituents. How are you and the Greens looking at implementing that and making it better for people?
Well, for sure. The UCP and the NDP don't believe in affordability in a lot of ways. I've been calling out so many things, like we're funding food banks for Albertans to go and get food, which impacts their mental health and dignity, on top of them running out of food. And so we're throwing money here and there and everywhere on Band-Aids instead of attacking the systemic issues that are causing, poverty in the first place. And I know the NDP had toyed in previous, I don't necessarily know about Alberta NDP, but I know that the federal NDP had toyed with UBI for a while. The Liberals did as well federally. I know there was pilot programs when I still lived in Ontario that the UCP canned because they were so successful at helping people out of poverty. But the Greens have always been big supporters of UBI. And, for me, I've known about UBI even before joining the Greens. I didn't really look into it, until I started getting involved into the Greens, like more specifically. Capitalism is obviously a problem, in so many different ways. It's hard to sustain. We know that there's always, boom and bust all the time. And the number one issue that, Albertans and Canadians are suffering from is income security. Income security is a domino effect. You affect your income, you affect everything. And so we need to ensure that Albertans have that income security, because when we have income insecurity, we have, mental health problems, we've got health problems, we got houseless problems, we got every problem you can name it, and we're just addressing these. And so instead of, we're just addressing the window dressings, really, the Band-Aid solutions, but they get ripped off by the next election. So we need to ensure that, our fellow citizens are, able to have that security. And so, we have royalties, which we know that the UCP are pissing away on, oil, issues that.
War rooms.
Yeah, war rooms.
Yeah.
There's so much. We're pulling funding from, our public education system and the healthcare so that they can line the pockets of the private industry. And so, if we can fund those appropriately and actually take our royalties and increase our royalties, and tax, the wealthy appropriately, the amount of money that we're saving is incredible when we lift fellow citizens out of poverty. The statistics, the reports that have been done professionally are there to show that we would be saving, into the billions by removing poverty as and its issues. When we have poverty, we're spending so much money because of, on medical and EMS and people going to the hospital and overdoses and, crime and, deaths and all of these things. It adds up, and we can't afford poverty. I know that sounds really funny, but we can't afford poverty. And we know that poverty is legislated. But we can afford to lift people up out of poverty. But we haven't seen an ethical government that actually cares about the individual needs of its citizens. So when affordability is not a part of your campaign, please self-exit yourself because you're not listening to the people that you're representing in the legislature. You know what I mean? That's why I said they would probably mute my mic, because if I was opposition, I would be demanding that this be the number one solution. We fix a lot of problems. So yeah, the Greens are all about UBI, and it is something that we can actually afford. It's not something that would destroy and bankrupt our province. And we have to get away from listening to all this rhetoric that are opposing, and there are, like I said, over 60 people are living on paycheck to paycheck, but then there's still that giant demographic who don't even get a paycheck and that are sleeping on our streets across from corner to corner of this province. So that's a huge demographic. So I know that, with the proper education and, that forum and dialogue and showing people where these components fit into place, then, more and more people, and more and more people are actually, they're realizing that the Band-Aid solutions haven't solved anything. And the favorite party brand that they vote for hasn't solved or been listening to their issues. So, Greens will definitely institute, a UBI, and we will look at it, on where to begin. And we know that, we know it already works. Despite there was some hiccups federally with CERB, we know that mental health improved when people were on CERB. There was a guaranteed income coming into. Now, the Liberals flubbered that up, but we did see some amazing statistics on how well it was working. We have a childcare benefit right now in this province. And so it works in a similar sense as a UBI. And so we already see some components already in existence right now that have worked really well. And so we know it's possible. We know we can do it. And that's something that people need to, get on board with more and demand and investigate. The information is out there is overwhelming. There's a lot of independent groups, advocacy groups that, have had funding to do the research and have shown where it works. And they do a fact question for when people want to come with their their critiques or their things that they want to challenge the format of UBI and all that. So it's phenomenal. I've went through it myself. I'm really I'm excited, and this is something that would solve our poverty issue. It would that compared with together with Housing First, which is something that every party needs to be adapting and fully funding in this province that we don't. A lot of it just boils down to education and accountability. We don't have accountability when it comes to our finances in this province and in many different sectors, including, education and that there's a lot of people that are missing, there's funding to certain things that they're just not getting, able to get those resources. And, like getting child assessments for, the disability spectrum and kind of where they fall into place. They're waiting years, but the funding is there. And it's just, there's a lot of hush hush on some of these frustrating things. And so parents need something, the largest statistic though or demographic, I should say, of people living in poverty are single people. Actually, there's a lot of people that are suffering right now that are single, and students coming into our province, or students living in our province that are trying to go and further education that they can't afford, so them having a guaranteed income so that, they can afford to rent, they can afford to, pay for books and what that would look like for public transportation. And, there's a lot of things that UBI could really solve, and it would not cripple the economy. And we just have to challenge those. We get those statements all the time, but it's a general blanket statement. Oh, UBI is a terrible thing because it would cripple our economy.
Yeah.
Okay, how? How would that cripple the economy? Please identify blah, blah, blah. Just like, Nixon here had said that the UCP would never adapt a rent cap,
Right.
of any kind, because it's not affordable for the province. Or, we've seen instances where it didn't work. There was no follow-up statement to say how. Where are you getting the data? Where is this information coming from? So sadly, people, because they're elected, people tend to listen to those voices. But, and a part of that is just we need to be better critical thinkers and peeling back the layers of blanket statements to get beyond some of those, scare tactics or, fear tactics, and, to turn people off. And, we know we're challenged financially in this province because of mismanagement of the funds and who's in charge right now. So yeah, the Greens are excited about, implementing a UBI, and I encourage people to reach out if they need some more information, and I'd love to, talk more about it and show people, why we need income security and how that is going to mitigate poverty and lift us up. We need to demand better. Let's demand better.
100%. And like you said, you're part of, number one, you called out all the other basically all the other MLAs, or you called out Notley in general. Like, why were you the only political representative at this advocacy group? It makes no sense for a bunch of politicians that claim that they want affordable housing, or we're going to do that. Like the NDP came out with their 5-year plan, which is really interesting, a 5-year plan on a 4-year term. Anyway, that seems to be that is the game plan for the political, I live in central Alberta. Red Deer Regional Hospital has been decimated by overuse. It's needed a new hospital. It's needed expansion for probably the last 5 to 10 years. It's needed a new hospital for the last 10. And there's been a lot of promises and a lot of photo ops of shovels, and it didn't matter which one it was, from Prentice to Radford to Redford, to Notley, to Smith, to Kenny. It doesn't matter which moron is in power. They're there with the shovel and looking like a village person,
Totally.
as opposed to actual getting things done. And it was actually a time back, I was actually a part of the advocacy group from the hospital that wanted to get funding. And that was when the NDP came back saying, oh, we'll have $1 million for you to do a survey. Going, why the hell do we have panels and surveys on things that have already been dealt with?
Yeah.
It's like you brought up education. Why the hell are we doing a new curriculum when the NDP worked directly with the administration and the teachers and educators? Even Dr. Angela Grace from the Alberta Party was part of that advocacy group that connected and was worked in connection with the NDP to come up with a curriculum that was going to better educate our kids. And the UCP, I can tell you why the UCP, you and I could both tell you why the UCP did it. When you brought up the advocacy and on the rent, no stability for rent, away from rent increases. And you said that it was Minister Nixon that, oh, we can't do this or whatever. Well, it's very interesting that Minister Nixon, his brother, and his father all have a share in the mustard seed, which benefits from poverty. And
Yeah.
people don't get that. And the worst part about it is it's driven by a religious connotation. So not
Yes.
like your religion, Jonathan, or my friend Marco's religion, where it's actually teaching inclusivity.
Yeah.
It's a using the Bible as a weapon,
Yeah.
to people in poverty. And I know the struggle has been with addiction and the
Yes.
safe consumption sites.
Yes.
I've seen the plan. I'm following you and Thompson's work, doing great work. We've all connected the dots back to that one prick who came from New Westminster, who Kenny implemented. Now Smith is using as the be all and end all for drug addiction because he's a former drug addict. Just because he was a cocaine addict that cleaned himself up through the 10-step program and through basically cold turkey detox that clearly doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah.
They've changed that system. What would the Green Party do for, like I said, we're looking at the UBI, we're looking at income stability, financial stability for those people that are battling addiction. And addiction is coming from, a lot of it's coming from financial instability. I mean, when you don't know where you're coming from, some days I look at it going, I don't blame someone for going and just forgetting the world, because the fact is that I pay attention too much to the world and it almost kills me on a daily basis. So if I could actually be, I guess, calmed by some sort of substance, might be a good thing. But there's also those things is it has to be we have to look at it. How do we keep our addicts and people battling addiction safe?
Right. Well, there's so many components to doing that, and you touched on so many things, and I'd like to come back after that to the rent control and the advocacy and the missing MLAs, because I think that's an important thing that I'd like to talk about. But in regards to, helping those struggling with addictions, the opposition parties always say, housing first, housing first, housing first. And we don't see any implementation of that really from our political opponents. And it needs to be a fully funded program. So housing first is really based off of Finland and their approach to, poverty and mental health and addictions and houselessness. And they've been able to drop the poverty rate and the houselessness ratio really low. And that's our goal. They've nearly been able to wipe it all out. And that's what needs to happen across, the world, really. But starting here in Calgary and across Alberta, we need to be fully funding that. And that's the thing that I've been talking a lot, when it really kind of disappointed me that people listen to the brand instead of the person. So, Joe Cece had recently just posted a video of him talking about, affordable housing and stuff like that. But we are, and how they're going to, really focus on building new affordable homes. Well, that's great. And it's a window dressing comment. It goes in line with needing for healthcare and education. We are so far behind on the amount of affordable housing units that, I think it's like a 1.4% vacancy rate in Calgary just for, rentals in itself. The province owned a lot of the non-market, non-for-profit homes, and they began to, as we know they like to do, they began to sell it off to private investors. And a lot of times what has happened is that they got demolished and a new condo went up and they were selling it, selling or renting them out for $1,700, $1,800 a pop. And so our inventory, our stock for affordable housing has dropped. And it didn't just start. It wasn't last year. It didn't start in 2019. It's been a big, major issue for decades. And so what I really want Albertans to really look at is how much are they actually standing behind their word and really see that they haven't. Affordable housing should be our inventory should have been increasing. We're doing about, we're only doing a few hundred, or at least up to like around 300 and some a year. We need into 2,000 to 2,500 units built per year. And so the Alberta Greens will fully fund the Housing First, program, and we will work with non-market nonprofits to increase their supply. I fell in love with non-market housing. I was watching a video a while back, and there was this gentleman talking about the BC homeless rate and the challenges of finding affordable housing. We know Vancouver is atrocious for finding anywhere affordable, but this guy had highlighted an amazing thing that was going on in Vienna, and it's been happening for decades. And I think it was like 60% of their population live in non-market. Now, if you were to put a non-market rental beside a market rental, you actually couldn't tell the difference. They were beautiful. They were, well done. The landscaping and, everything, all the amenities on the inside, it was amazing. And what it ended up doing is becoming a very huge option, a competitive option to market rentals. So when towers go up there, and they're being, rented out for 1,700, 1,800, 13, or not 13, but 2,000 a month or more. Those are market rentals. And so what they're campaigning on in BC is really increasing our non-market stock, which I said, in Vienna, for example, is as beautiful as a market. And what it ends up doing is it's affordable. So they are extremely, less expensive per month to rent. Whereas, for example, and I'm just using this as an example, it's like if a market rental was renting a one bedroom for $1,800 a month, they would be renting it at $1,000 to $1,100 at most. And what it ends up doing is when you get more stock in non-market, which again is a very beautiful space to live in, it drives down market rental prices, and it becomes way more affordable for anyone to get a space to live. And so it's important that we increase the stock of our affordable housing and not just have some, rundown place, which we do see a lot of that around the province and here in Calgary. We need beautiful spaces that are affordable, and we need to make sure that we lift our houseless population up off the streets. And so that's really what happens when you pair Housing First and you fund it properly. Housing First gets somebody the shelter they need, and it pairs them with a worker that is going to help them with their addictions. So the Greens are all about funding as well mental health and addictions, as and making it as accessible as regular healthcare. We've seen what's going on with COVID and the results that people have experienced. It was so distressing. People were getting laid off. People were struggling already, and then to have COVID hit and face an eviction because they couldn't work and afford. There was so many issues happening that it impacted people's mental health, exponentially. And the need for mental health care is so important that it needs to be fully accessible, and available to anyone that needs it, including addiction services. So we know that the UCP is about abstinence. It's a very religious, approach to, addiction services. It's like the 12-step program for AA. And, there's a lot of issues within that. It's not they use it as a one, Band-Aid fix-all kind of scenario, and that's not it. And there's been a lot of misinformation passed around about open consumption sites, safe consumption sites, and we need to get back to that. So, the Greens would, fully stand behind safe consumption sites and making sure people have the adequate support. Again, it all goes back to cuts to funding. We really just need a government, an ethical government that supports people that are experiencing these things. Our Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, Nicholas Ease, I was really impressed. I wish I wasn't working that day, but there was a conference downtown on this that he was, a part of, and there was a lot of advocacy groups out front, that were calling to question everything that was going on in that, on that conference and in just the direction the government was going in. But yeah, the Greens are all about making sure that we are targeting and eliminating poverty and people who are suffering on these addictions, and making sure there's proper funding, and making sure there's transparency, and accountability. And that's what we need. There's a lot of distrust in the government, which is absolutely understandable, and I feel that as well, 100%. And so they're just, the people below, people like myself, I'm renting, we're not getting the support, and especially people that are on the street. Like I said, 4 years of opposition, there was, we didn't hear anything focused on them. We didn't hear, it was hush, and it's frustrating, and they will show up to photo ops, here and there. But, in terms of advocating and getting things moved and passed, it hasn't been, no dents were really seriously made. So, we've been in a crisis in this, specific sector for decades, and it's just getting worse. I take transit. I currently don't drive, and people are, experiencing overdoses on trains and at train stations. I've had to use the emergency text line for the Calgary Transit Service many times to ensure that someone who is passed out or, experiencing an overdose is getting the immediate help. And I've been, very happy that that's there, but it's really sad. And the reason why those things exist is because they've been, these people suffering with addictions have been extraordinarily neglected, and it's a human rights violation. And it's such injustice. And people are saying that, the downtown is not safe, even though we do see traffic, building up, but it still hasn't changed. And the answer is not policing ourselves out of the problem. You can't do that. And that's always been, the answer, a Band-Aid solution, go in and, tear down Tent City and, try to push them. I've lived in Toronto. I've seen that done all the time, trying to, any low income building, they would tear it down and build something beautiful and push, people in poverty and those who struggle with addictions further and further away from. But they don't solve the problem. They don't try to, hit the systemic issues with it. They don't try to fix the root cause. They just fix the visual effects. They disturb the public. So let's get rid of them. That's not how you deal with human life. And it's been so frustrating. So, the Greens, we want to attack this issue. I live in the downtown. Many Greens, across the province are, live in cities, and even in the rural areas, there are issues there as well, and we need to, we have amazing experts, amazing advocates, and, they are out there hitting the streets, helping those in need. But again, they need to hear something and see something done in the legislature, and I said this earlier a moment ago, that poverty is legislated. It is. All this is legislated. We're funding other things that don't matter. We're building pipelines and all these things instead of, helping everyday Albertans. And, so the Greens are very much focused on, lifting everyone up that are struggling and, supporting those who have addictions. Again, we want to fully fund a mental health and addictions, services paired with our healthcare, and we want to include dental and eye, all of these things. We all need to look after every area of our lives. And when there's no housing, when there's food insecurity, when there is income insecurity, it's such a burden on the mind and the body that we understand that people end up resorting to trying to cope, and all these coping mechanisms, and growing up in difficult families, and people need that help. They need the love from their government, and people, we have such a negative view of the government, and it's completely understandable. We got to change that. And by changing it, we need accountability. We need the right people. We need for the people in the government. We need, and we have to, like you were saying over and over again, we need to start listening to these candidates, and stop saying window dressings and Band-Aid solutions. Demand better. We can do better. I really do believe it, but people in these nonprofit organizations are getting burnt out, and they're getting frustrated because people are dying on the streets. We've got bus shelters doors getting ripped off, and not adequate enough planning to ensure that we had warming shelters. This is not acceptable. We gotta demand better, and we can do better. We talked a little bit about religion. I actually ended up becoming a humanist. So I don't attribute to or attain or attach myself to any faith community anymore. But I fell in love with Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek.
Yep.
And, he talks a lot about the human condition and our need to mature into adults. He looks at the planet as our cradle and our world really as the universe out there. We're not ready to engage in what might be out there in the universe until we, get to a place where, all of these issues that we experience are human created issues.
Right.
And they're neglect. And we need to look after each other. And when we finally become one people, where that we can eliminate houselessness and food insecurity, and income insecurity, and all of these issues among mental health and addictions, we can solve those things. And when we get there, nothing is impossible. The universe is our oyster. There are so many things. And so, I don't believe that ending poverty is a utopist, dream. As a humanist, we believe that these are human issues that were created and human hands can solve them. And it's all about there are so many, it's getting back down onto planet Earth and walking over to our fellow human and understanding what journey they've been on and how we can, lift them up.
Right.
And all of this is avoidable, and we can do it if we are willing to, do the hard work, listen, and roll our sleeves up. You'll always see me with my sleeves rolled up. I'm ready to do something, and I hope that I can inspire enough Calgarians here in Calgary, Buffalo, to join me, and there's so much we can do, Darren. Sorry, I took over here, and
that's perfect. No, it's great. I have two things three. When you're talking about how we can be the human side to induce change. So number one, UBI, 100% getting that income stability. Number two, now when we're talking about food insecurity, the biggest battle we face right now is the conglomerates of like the BlackRocks and the Vanguards, Bill Gates, who's not a nice guy, by the way, plays a nice guy on Big Bang Theory, but sure as shit is a piece of garbage. And his Gates Foundation is buying up land, and so that's where a lot of like the food, you're absolutely correct. Food insecurity is driven by humans because of the fact it's a capitalist system that's driving that insecurity. One suggestion that my wife and I are always discussing, one of the things that I would really like to see, and if we're going to be stuck in this capitalist compensated horrible system, and the grocers like that piece of crap Galen Weston is dictating how we do things, why can't we give our people in poverty the dignity? Why are we forcing them to go to a food bank? Yes. Why aren't we just providing them with gift cards from grocery stores?
Mm-hmm.
Then they have that dignity of just going and grocery shopping like every one of us. Mm-hmm. It isn't a stigma of having to go. Number one, I don't know a food bank that runs on proper hours for people in poverty. Like basically your food banks are based on the 9 to 5 business model, which people in poverty are dealing with hunger and income insecurity 24/7. So the fact is that they can't access anything until 9 o'clock when the volunteers open up the food bank,
right?
And they have to rely on corporate donors to fund the food bank.
Yeah.
So those sort of things. So that's the second piece. The third piece, and I think is one that we need to really look at, and we're looking at our health system. Why do we not have a medical health professional in every medical facility? Be it a counselor, be it a psychologist, be it a psychiatrist. I know for our family, our oldest, Pixel, who's a member of the 2S community, so they struggled being in Alberta, not being accepted, being in rural Alberta for sure. But they were dealing with, they've always struggled with identity, and identity caused anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts. I thank God or our higher being for Dr. Azibi, who is the child psychiatrist in rural Alberta. And they saved our kid's life
Wow.
because of the fact that they were there to be able to deal with them in the unit in Red Deer Regional Hospital. So I'm not saying that the staff and everyone that are like, I've been in Red Deer Regional. I had a stent procedure done for huge kidney stone. It was the size of my kidney.
Wow.
That had to be broken up. They did the best they could. Our system is flawed. When they said, "Oh, we're going to get you to do a survey," I said, "I'll have no problem. I will do the survey and say the staff are doing the best they can with what they got. It's a MASH unit in every one of our healthcare facilities." But I will say our government is failing, and our government has failed for, like you said, for decades.
Yeah.
But that mental health piece, like I'm a firm believer, if we can take care of our mental health first, our
Yeah.
physical health will follow. So
100%.
we would have less of a burden physically, less of the burden on the addiction piece, less of the burden that way if we actually had mental health professionals on site
Yeah.
in your walk-in clinics, and especially in your emergency rooms that
Yeah.
aren't just waiting for a psychiatrist to come in.
No, I
But
totally agree. We need it as well in our police force. They are going out and responding to overdoses and people in distress on the streets, where a health crisis is happening, a mental health crisis, and they're exercising in a lot of ways, and not all of them, but there are quite a bit brute force, insensitive approach. They're not equipped to deal with that, and a lot of these de-escalation situations occur when we had proper mental health advocates and workers, on patrol with them. And we need it in our schools, as well. Students who are experiencing distress. And so 100%, that's part of, I think, the format of fully funding mental health and addiction services within the province is ensuring that these tiers all are fully supported, in healthcare, on our police services, and in our schools, and especially within affordable communities, low income communities where there's so much they're experiencing as well. And I know that that's what happens a lot in housing first programs. So it's needed. We really do, and you're absolutely right that mental health, when addressed, greatly impacts the body so much, and there are so much improvements. So I completely agree, and that's part of our plan as a Green Party to ensure that these tiers with accountability. Right now, as you said, our province, our government has failed us, on where the money is going, and so it's not just about implementing. We really got to do some heavy digging, and I think that's failed with the previous NDP government when they took office. They rearranged their chess pieces, but they didn't really see, how, if the system was broken, because look at how we had a UCP government for so long, and so nothing really changed, in the core of what was happening within the government. We just rearranged the chess pieces a bit, and then the next government, the UCP that won in 2019, just put the chess pieces back to wherever they wanted it to be.
It's arranging the furniture on the Titanic. We're all going down, but you're still shifting the chairs to see where we can put this before we go down with the band and the captain and the rest of them.
Exactly.
the aspect, and we're going to wrap up here. I know you've got to go, I've got to go, that sort of thing. This is uh, what people need to realize. I'm actually on the board of AHS for mental health and addiction, but this talking truth is my way to advocate for that. I'm on an advisory role, so I can't say what we should do. I can't demand what we should do. I can only suggest, you
Right.
know what, if this would be a good idea. So this is where I ask the public that are watching that number one, to want to support the Greens, want to support independent candidates, is to connect with your MLA, get them to connect with us in regards of providing the proposals that we can advise the AHS. So
Yeah.
if your MLA or your candidate running is not currently in the ledge, this is a way that you can get that message to up the flagpole to the proper people. And I mean, it's just that one step, like you said.
Yeah.
But I'm a firm believer that we're in a authoritarian dictatorship under a guise of democracy.
Yes.
But all we've got to get out of it currently is the democratic system. So we need to utilize the voting aspect and how we can get more people out there, especially with the messaging that keeps getting muddled by Elections Alberta.
Yeah.
That is and this, on my side, I'll leave it on with this is the fact that my experience with Elections Alberta is tainted, and I don't believe they're a true independent representation of Alberta. I believe there's a lot of UCP driven mandate. I used to be able to, they've actually gone through 4 chain of command organizational maps since Kenny has come on. And I actually found the one that connected the Alexis Alberta directly to the finance minister.
Okay.
Or justice minister, I should say. So they've changed with the Elections Act and all that being changed. It isn't against the Elections Act by having that, because they've changed it more. With all these changes, with all that, how can people voice their displeasure towards this duopoly? What can they do to try and get change?
Yeah, I guess the number one thing they can do is, and I know that they've, to some respects, they've been reaching out to their MLAs. You talked about the NDP being a centrist party, and that's something else I definitely wanted to briefly touch on, is that the NDP has moved their campaign headquarters to Calgary because for them, this is battleground.
No.
I haven't seen them out on the streets at all.
No.
I haven't seen them at any rallies for rent control or affordability. They're not talking about that right now. They're catering to the right arm of their centrist party.
Yeah.
And I know that's ticking off a lot of members and voters, that they're hearing, what they're seeing. The best thing to do is literally, we don't want to lose more voters. We don't want to see what ends up happening in Alberta, what happened in Ontario, where we had 10 million eligible and around 4 million showed up. Connect with everybody and really find out, what candidate is really going to, stand for my values. Vote your conscience. Go beyond voting out Danielle Smith. Ask the questions. We're close to an election, so I know communication is going to be tough. There's so many doors that still need to be knocked on, but reach out. My email is there. I know if you connect with the Green Party, their contact response rate is great, amazing. We will reach back out to you. But voting is a way to do it. I believe the Greens have a very great chance at being, a huge challenge for the next election, to be that third option. And I'm excited. And so that's the best thing that we can do is get out to vote and demand better, demand more. If you are sticking with a certain party, call them out on this. Some people say you just need to settle for the NDP to win over the UCP, and later it'll come. Well, it didn't come in 2015. It didn't come in 2019. And a lot of people are saying we cannot afford 4 more years of this because more people are suffering and struggling, And so my call is to reach out to us. You said, you're on the advisory board. I would love to definitely connect with you. And I know other Greens. We have Julian, who's our Schultz, who's our health critic, and I would love to get him connected with you. And that's the thing. I'm always asking people, and I'm trying to find and build my own contact base as well for people who are in these healthcare and education and advocacy and help us write policy. We are a party for the people. We need to if we're not connecting with people, you can't write policy. We see what the failures that's going on, and we will definitely write. And I know every party does this. They write policy to the best of their ability. I say best, quote unquote. But it's better to have connections with a party that aligns with your ethics, aligns with your heart, aligns with your needs, and help them write policy. Get involved, become a member, shape this province. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been connecting with different organizations myself, and writing good policy that we need desperately, that is missing from the platforms and the priorities of others. And that's the thing. We were talking a little bit about that rent control rally. They didn't even want to actually. The media didn't want to include that I was running for Calgary Buffalo. Originally, they had me stated as the vice president of the Green Party. I was the only candidate that showed up to these rallies to advocate for affordability and rent control and protection over tenants. They didn't want to include that I was a candidate. I had to go back and ask them. I said, can you please include that I was the only individual? And they did. I appreciate it. They did do a course correction, but I was the only party that showed up. Yeah. I'm a renter. I'm someone who struggles financially as well. That's one of the other reasons. As I said to you before the show started, I was involved briefly for the NDP. I was a part of the party just like some other people that I know were a part of the party, and there were things that I needed to see. There were things that I was people I was advocating for. And I got smiles and handshakes and hugs and said, yes, we believe in that. And then when it came down to, writing these things into policy, it was just like, that's the thing, the left hand doesn't want to piss off the right hand.
That's right.
And so when it does, you hit a wall, we got to go back and talk to our constituents and, that's what a party whip is, right? You have to get in line. And so when you're not in line, you're not represented, because you're silencing the voices of need. Because we already know that there's a lot of money and organization in the right, and so that's where a lot of that's where the strongest arm on the body is going to win, right? And so I encourage everyone. I know everyone's frustrated. We have an election coming up. Reach out to us. We're listening, and we're not going to misrepresent. We want to make sure that we're hearing people, and that we're running for the people that need us.
Awesome. So like you said, we've got we'll have the information in the description for the show. But how can people, if they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach you?
Totally. My email is Jonathan, JONATHAN .parks, PARKS @albertagreens.ca. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. You can reach out to me that way if you don't do email. I'd love to hear from you. I want to build a strong campaign. I have a growing volunteer group, but we need to knock on more doors. If you really believe in the vision, and I hope you do, because over 60% of us are struggling. So I'm resonating, I'm sure, even if, the Greens have never been a party for choice for you. But let's drive affordability. We can afford to be affordable. So I'm asking, if you want to reach out to me, please do. I'd love to hear from you. As we get busier, it does become a bit of a challenge. But reach out to me anyway, and if just continue to, and I will absolutely connect with those who do. It's important to continue to connect with as many Albertans as I possibly can, and yeah, that's the best way to connect.
Awesome. Well, Jonathan, thank you very much for taking the time to join us for Talking Truth. And the door is always open. The mic is always open. The soapbox, whatever the term we want to use, you and the Green Party are always welcome to join us. And actually, bring it up to Jordan. If interested, because we know the current government regulations are you need to be a sitting member to have a debate with Notley and Smith, we would be glad to host a leadership debate on here online for people. So let Jordan and the team reach out. We'll see if Barry wants to join, even the leader of the Liberal. I'm not going to invite any of the radical right wing. I can hear enough of them. But if we want to have the people that are on the progressive to the left, absolutely we'll have 3 or 4 people be able to do that. So
beautiful. Well, I appreciate the extended welcome. I'll pass it on to Jordan. I did hear some discussion that they may be changing how they approach the leadership debate because Albertans want to hear from more than just the two. So I think that there is some possibility that they're gonna, we're the party with the most candidates outside of the big 2 tents. Right. And so we're gaining more. So it would be really silly and dumb of them to exclude Jordan. But I love
mainstream media. They usually don't care unless there's money coming in. So
exactly.
But yeah. So that's great. Yeah. Just forward that stuff through. And like I said, we're gonna have more conversations like this. Hopefully, it is we're not gonna bother too much going into the election. Hopefully, after the election, and hopefully you have a seat from some people so you can continue your advocacy work regardless of you're sitting in the ledge.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm hoping for some awesome turnout, and if I can just add one more thing, as a small party, donations are a really challenge because a lot of people are, do I risk donating money to a third party that's smaller? The Greens, with the little money that we are, getting in, and it is increasing, and we are shocked at times when we take a look at what people are donating. We're very grateful. But I would love to just, if I can, if you are resonating with our message, reach out. Even if you want to chat before, tossing us some money, I would love to. Jordan would love to. Our party would love to chat with you. But yeah, it's hard. It's tough to raise money for a small party. So that's one way of definitely supporting. If you aren't able to volunteer, if you have any type of limitations work-wise or mobility or any kind, but you want to know how you can support us, a donation would be awesome. Some of us are, we're grassrooting the party, so we're building it, and it's going phenomenally well. But we're still missing pieces as a grassroots. So being able to raise money in some of these areas without a CA, a constituency association, is a bit of a challenge. So donate directly to the party at albertagreens.ca, and then reach out and let us know if you're donating to a specific riding that you don't see a CA in. Please follow up and say, hey, my name is John Doe or Jane Doe, and I've donated to, this riding. I just wanted to let you know. We would love to hear from you and celebrate with you and thank you. So yeah, that's one thing I would definitely love to share.
Awesome. And so like I said, we'll have that. We have got the links below or above, where depending on what you're watching tonight. But yeah, so we'll have that. We'll share that, and we will stay connected. And if we don't talk to you going in the election, good luck. And let's bring some change.
You bet. Thank you so much, and have a great day. And I appreciate being invited here.
Hey, not a problem. Thanks, Jonathan.
You're welcome. Take care.
You too. So that was Jonathan Parks, great voice of advocacy for Calgary Buffalo as well as for the Green Party. Really appreciate Jonathan coming on, and appreciate you guys tuning in. You can like, subscribe to us on YouTube, all the stuff above, Odyssey, follow us on Mastodon, all those different things. You want to support the show, it's ko-fi.com or coffee.com/talking truth, and that's where you can get the information, more information on the show, but the merchandise, like the beautiful coffee mug that I have on me with our boy Curry. Remember, ACAB, all curries are beautiful, and support your rescue dogs. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you all again next time.